In this video, we're going to explore the basic process used to create an integration services package. This is based on exercise 13.3 in chapter 13 of the book. Now, to begin with, we launch the SQL Server data tools, which I have already done. And then we're going to create a new project. So we'll go to File and choose New Project. From here, we want to choose an integration services project. You can see that when you choose an integration services project, you can provide a name, a location, and a solution name. That is that there's going to be a first solution in the project as well. So let's go ahead and give the project the name of Export Products to Excel. And we'll accept the solution name of the same and the default storage location. We'll click on OK. This can take a few moments depending on the speed of your system to generate this new integration services package. Now, when you have an integration services package, you're going to need to do three things when you're exporting or importing data or something like that. First, you'll need a connection to the data source. Then you'll need a connection to the data destination. And finally, you're going to need the actual data flow. So how do we get the data from the source to the destination? So we want to add a connection. Therefore, I'm going to come down here in the bottom in the Connection Managers area. We can right-click and choose New Connection, and then you get the full list, including a connection just for files. So now that we have the full list, we're going to scroll down and choose an OLADB connection and click on Add. And this gives us an empty OLADB Connection Manager dialog box. So now we need to click on New to add a new connection. And what we're actually going to do is connect to our local server. So we can click the drop-down menu and wait for it to pull the list of the servers that are available to us, including the local server. And here we have server 1. Notice we also have our instances, such as sales and testing. So we'll choose server 1. We're going to use Windows Authentication, and then we'll choose the AdventureWorks 2012 database. And then we'll click on OK. And we'll click OK again. Now that gives us our connection to the AdventureWorks database for the data source. Now we need to create a connection for Excel. So we're going to right-click in the Connection Managers area again and choose New Connection. And let's choose Microsoft Excel or simply Excel. Click Add. And it wants to know where we're going to store this particular file. So we need to choose the location for the file. We'll browse. And in my case, I'm just going to place it on the desktop, and we'll call it products.xls. And click Open. We're going to save it in the Excel 97 through 2003 format, so we know any version of Excel will be able to open it. And we will go ahead and indicate that first row has column names, which means that we're going to use the column names from the SQL Server table as the row names in the Excel worksheet. We'll click OK. And now we have our two connection managers. So at this point, we're ready to begin the actual work portion of this package, the data flow portion of the package. So with the workspace on the Control Flow tab, what we want to do is drag a data flow task over to this space and drop it. So we'll click, drag, and drop. And that places the data flow task there. Now this is a very simple integration services package. You can, in more complex packages, bring over things like execute SQL task, FTP tasks, and so forth, and have a sequence of events that happens throughout the control of this package. But ours will remain simple. Now we'll double-click on the data flow task, which you'll see will actually just take us to the data flow tab. Or we can choose the data flow tab, and then from there we can choose the data flow task. Once we're here on the data flow tab, you'll notice that we now have the option to begin pulling over information from our toolbox. And notice that it is the SQL Server Integration Services toolbox. So I can choose my sources, like an Excel source or an OLADB source, and that's what we want. So we'll drag over an OLADB source. double-click that source, and you'll notice that we have this connection already configured because it sees the OLEDB connection manager that we have created before. So we're going to access a table, and what table are we going to access? Well, we're going to access our production.product table because we want to export the products. If you click on columns, you could choose the columns that you want to export. So if you only want some of the columns and not others, you can change those. For example, you might not want the row good. Maybe you don't want all of these dates, such as the cell end date and the cell start date, the discontinued date or the modified date. So you can deselect anything that you do not want to include. And once you have everything set, click on OK. That gives you your source. Now notice you have a blue arrow and a green arrow coming out of the source. The blue arrow is, okay, the data source is available, I can access it, I can work with it, what do I do next? The red arrow is for when there's an error and we cannot gain access to that table or that data. So we could go in a different direction in our data flow task if the data is unavailable. So at this point we have our source object. Now we're going to need a destination object, so let's open other destinations and drag over an Excel destination. And then once we've done that, we'll release it. And so now we have our Excel destination. Now with the Excel destination pulled over, we're ready to bring over the other transform to move data from the OLEDB data source to the Excel destination. So we're going to expand other transforms and use the simple one called copy column. Drag it over, drop it, and it'll be in place. Now what we need to do is click on our OLEDB data source, click the blue arrow, and then click on copy column. And you'll see that it says we're going to go from the OLEDB source to the copy column transform. Now the copy column transform, you can go into that if you wish, but all this allows you to do is change the output alias. So if you want to change the name, for example, if you want name to be changed to product name as the output alias, you could do that here. We're just going to pass everything straight through, so we're not worried about that. The next thing we need to do is click the blue line coming out of copy column and connect it to the Excel destination. Now we can double click on the Excel destination and choose where we actually want to put this in that Excel table. So I'm going to say for the name of the Excel sheet, I want to create a new sheet. And we're going to call this Excel destination, and we'll accept the default values that it has chosen here and click OK. Now we can choose it from the list, and here we have Excel destination. If you go to mappings, it will automatically do all of the mappings for you. You can change them if you want to, and then you can click on OK. So at this point, we have created our basic integration services package. That's really all there is to it. Once you have that integration services package, then you can go ahead and run the package. Now, as a warning to you about creating integration services packages like this, when you're working with Excel now, because it is a 32-bit interface, you'll have to change some settings in your integration services package to actually make this work. So the driver for Excel is 32-bit, and by default, projects run in 64-bit mode. So what you'll need to do is come over here to the project in Solution Explorer, and you can right-click it and then choose Properties. And here from the Properties window, you can then go into Configuration Properties and Debugging. And notice it says Run 64-bit Runtime. You simply need to set that to false. And when that is set to false, then you can read from or write to Excel files. If you do not do that, the Excel processing will not work simply because the Excel driver is 32-bit. So with that, we've created our package, we've configured it to run in 32-bit mode, which will allow it to access the Excel file. We could run it here and it would work to do the actual processing, but at this point you've seen the involved steps in actually creating your first basic SQL Server integration services package.